Avi and Michael both spent time last week examining the message of 1 Peter 3:15, a message that calls us to give a reasoned defense, an apologia, to anyone who asks us for the hope that we have. But how do we know whether our defense is reasonable? Who's to say that my reasons are more rational than anyone else's? Is there a standard for truth and reasonability? In this lecture, Tom Price introduces the topic of logic. Logic helps us tell the difference between a good argument and a bad one, between a reason that should be accepted and one that is irrelevant or even unfair. Ultimately, logic helps reveal truth. Whether we know it or not, we all use logic every day. This lecture will help you to use it successfully, so that you will not only be prepared to give a defense, but to give a well-reasoned defense for the hope that you have.
Tom Price is an academic tutor at the Oxford Centre for Christian Apologetics. He's been an itinerant evangelist in various settings, brings his expertise and especially his knowledge in the arts to all of his lectures in Christian apologetics. He also did his master's in apologetics at Biola in La Mirada, California, but has really traveled much of this globe, and you will enjoy also Tom Price's teaching. I'm privileged to have him as well as one of our colleagues actively involved in the entire program at the OCCA in Oxford.
What is logic? Logic is what tells you what makes sense. That it makes more sense to have a shower after sport rather than before. Logic is what tells you that if you're in this room, then you can't also be in the supermarket, unless for some reason you live at the supermarket. Logic is what tells you that if you're accused of a crime, but you were somewhere else and you've got a good alibi and you had to be there to commit that crime, then you can't have been the one who committed it. Logic is what tells you that if you've arranged to meet someone, and if they're not there, then they have become late or delayed, or your arrangements have become confused in some way. Logic is the maths of life. It's the everyday science of thinking. It's the nuts and bolts of common sense. What good is logic? Well, logic teaches you which ideas contradict each other. It tells you what makes sense and what doesn't. It builds the mental habit of thinking in an orderly way. And it can help you to discover what the truth is. We need logic to test our authorities. Logic can actually aid faith too. Jesus was a black belt in logic. Christian faith is not anti-logic, it's pro-logic. If the resurrection of Jesus from the dead didn't happen, then Christian faith is untrue and meaningless. Now, this might sound like French existentialist philosophy, but it's actually a direct quote from the Bible, from the book of Corinthians. If this event didn't happen, then it doesn't matter how you feel or what you need. The hard concrete of reality doesn't care and won't flex. On the other hand, if it did happen, if the resurrection is true, then what I want to do or feel or be doesn't make it untrue. It would still be true even if I wasn't aware of that or refused it for some reason. As we learn to think well, we need to learn how to handle ideas, and this means understanding how we can talk about ideas, even religious or political ideas, without becoming belligerent or overly defensive. In fact, when you put something simply with an appeal to feelings or an authority that people don't recognize or believe in, then you become less convincing to thinking people. Arguments or discussions don't have to involve anger. We can disagree with each other about ideas without being disagreeable. People are all equal and of deep value and worth, but some ideas are not. Some ideas are simply better than others. Take, for example, the idea that I should be tolerant. Imagine that sitting at the back of the room, I see somebody picking their nose, and maybe I say to myself, I'm a tolerant kind of guy. I'm going to let that person pick their nose, even if they start eating it. But then imagine that I see the window slowly slide open and a ninja crawls in at the back of the room. Jumping into the back with his sword, he quietly starts killing people in the back row as he moves stealthily behind. Would it be okay for me to just say, I'm going to tolerate the nose picker, and in the same sort of way, I'm going to tolerate the ninja killing people? I don't think so. Some ideas are just bad ideas. People deserve equal respect and honouring, but some ideas are just bad ideas. There is a problem though. We live in a world of ideas. We're bombarded with messages, especially through advertising. It's good to be able to spot the tricks then, the methods that are used to try to convince us that something is true, or to believe something, or even perhaps to buy something. When you watch advertisements, maybe we could ask, how is this advert trying to convince me to buy this thing? What's the trick that's being used to get me to agree with this idea? Sometimes something's offered to us on the basis of what people who use it will look like or feel like. Now, it's good to illustrate arguments, but an illustration or a story can't replace an argument. When I use the word argument in this way, I use it to mean something quite specific. I'm meaning linked up reasons or joined up thinking towards some idea. I'm not meaning people arguing with each other and disagreeing with each other in a forceful, aggressive way, or being angry with each other. If you drive a car, you might see this message by the side of the road. Don't drink and drive. That's a sensible message, but is it a good argument? It's actually an assertion. There's a big difference between making an assertion and making an argument. An assertion is a statement or claim about reality. It's a description of what you think, if you like, whereas an argument is a set of claims about reality that are linked together in a way that leads you through to believing a conclusion. Let's turn that government message into an argument. Here's the assertion: don't drink and drive. Now here's the argument. Drinking and driving is dangerous. You should avoid doing dangerous things, and therefore you should avoid drinking and driving. Now you can look at the argument and you can ask, what reasons do you have for coming to that conclusion? Is it a good moral principle to avoid doing dangerous things? Is this a good or a bad argument? Because the other person has laid out their reasoning. An assertion can lead to a row, but an argument demands rational discussion, and it opens the opportunity by sharing reasons for a conversation or a dialogue to occur. Most arguments have at least two statements that lead through to a conclusion, and these statements are known as premises. These statements or premises are known as truth claims about reality. And logic is used to drive through those truth claims to the conclusion. What's the difference between a good argument and a bad argument? Philosophers call good arguments sound arguments. And a sound argument must have three things. It must have unambiguous words, it must have valid logic, and it must have true premises that accurately reflect reality. First of all, the problem of ambiguous words. Are the premises or claims clear? Is it clearly understandable what claims are being made? Make sure that the terminology or the words don't have double meanings. The second test that an argument must pass to be sound is this: does the conclusion really follow naturally from the premises? Or in other words, is the logic valid, or are there logical mistakes being committed here? The third test that a sound argument must pass is this: are the premises true? Do the truth claims in the premises accurately correspond to the facts of reality as they are? Now, if and only if you can answer yes to all of those three tests or questions, can you then conclude that the argument is a good or sound argument? What is ambiguity though? Now this just means murky meaning. This is where something has more than one meaning. The old comedian Groucho Marx tells a short story. One morning, I shot an elephant in my pajamas. Now there's an ambiguity here. There are two ways of understanding what he said. One morning I was in my pajamas when I shot an elephant, or one morning I shot an elephant when the elephant was wearing my pajamas. Now the English language often relies on an ambiguity of language for puns or jokes, but it doesn't necessarily make for good arguments. Some statements are ambiguous, and phrasing or punctuating them differently can land you with entirely different meanings. Have a listen to this letter. Dear John, I want a man who knows what love is all about. You are generous, kind, thoughtful. People who are not like you admit to being useless and inferior. You've ruined me for other men. I yearn for you. I have no feelings whatsoever when we're apart. I can be forever happy. Will you let me be yours, Janet? Now I'm just going to change the punctuation and you'll see how this affects the meaning. I won't change any of the words, but listen to the letter again. Dear John, I want a man who knows what love is. All about you are generous, kind, thoughtful people who are not like you. Admit to being useless and inferior. You've ruined me. For other men, I yearn. For you, I have no feelings whatsoever. When we're apart, I can be forever happy. Will you let me be yours, Janet? Other statements can be read in two ways. Save soap and waste paper. That could mean save soap, but just waste the paper, just throw it away. Or save soap and keep any waste paper. Here's another one. I live by the river, drop in sometime. Drop into my house or drop into the river. You choose. Here are some examples from newspaper headlines. Panda mating fails. Veterinarian takes over. Weak police force due to lack of intelligence. Here's an example of ambiguity in a formal argument. Premise 1. A plane is a carpenter's tool. Premise 2. The Boeing 747 is a plane. Conclusion. Therefore, the Boeing 747 is a carpenter's tool. Now, that obviously doesn't make sense, but what's happened here? It's easy to spot that ambiguity is operating here, and it makes for great jokes, but ambiguity in this argument has led us to a silly conclusion. How did that happen? Well, the reason is that the word plane is being used in two different senses, and this argument trades on the ambiguity of the word plane. This fault is quite easy to spot, especially when you know that the conclusion is so obviously false, but it's not always so easy to see that an argument is unsound because of an ambiguous word. Let's look at an example now of invalid logic. Premise 1. High-fat foods are bad for you. Premise 2. Some yogurt is high in fat. Conclusion. Therefore, all yogurt is bad for you. There's some invalid logic here, but have you spotted it? Both premises are true, but is it a good argument? What's gone wrong? Well, we've moved from a premise about some yogurt to a conclusion about all yogurt. Now, after ambiguity and invalid logic, the third thing to look out for are false premises. Here's an example of false premises. Premise 1. I only ate the broken biscuits. Premise 2. Broken biscuits contain no calories. Conclusion, therefore, I ate no calories. If both premises were true, then the conclusion would seem to follow. The logic of the argument's valid, and there doesn't seem to be an ambiguity in the argument. There are no double meanings. But premise 2 is false. Broken biscuits do contain calories. We're now going to work through some sets of logical fallacies or errors in everyday thinking. Self-contradictions, false dilemmas, ad hominems, and slippery slopes. Self-contradiction happens when a statement fails to satisfy its own conditions for rational acceptability or truthfulness. In other words, it doesn't make sense. Here are a few examples. I cannot speak a word of English. This is not a sentence. There is no such thing as truth. And you should never believe anything without empirical evidence. Now, if a statement is self-contradictory, then it cannot be true. False dilemmas are when a restricted set of options are given when in reality there are more available. You're asked to choose from A or B, when in reality there's C, D, E, and F, which is being obscured. You're presented with only two options when actually more are on the table. You either like McDonald's or Burger King. You're either a communist or a fascist. Either God exists or evil exists. And you're either pro-gay or you're homophobic. Ad hominem logical fallacies, or against the person or to the man fallacies, attempt to undermine the truth of an idea by attacking the person who's proposing that idea. Here are a few examples. Don't believe him, he's stupid. Only uneducated people believe that. That book was written by a left-wing hippie. You can't possibly take those ideas seriously. Or here's an example from the New Testament. Here is a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Now this fails because an idea can still be true even if the person holding the idea is stupid or uneducated. It's a kind of character assassination that fails to really affect the idea itself. Slippery slope fallacies are another kind of mistaken thinking that we need to watch out for. This reasoning aims to show that a particular proposition or idea is untrue because of increasingly unacceptable events. Now, this can be used positively, and it's an important social argument, so we can see where a particular line of reasoning or policy may end up. But as a means of logic, it's fallacious. Here are some examples. If women are educated, then they will not want to stay at home and be good wives and mothers, and there will be unrest in our society. If you pass legislation against abortion on demand, then poor women will not be able to afford to keep their babies and will have dangerous backstreet abortions. If I make an exception for you, then I have to make an exception for everyone. Here is this man performing many miraculous signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and then the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation. Here are another set of logical fallacies. Complex questions and appeals through force, pity, consequences, and popularity, and hasty generalizations. What are complex questions? This is where two otherwise unrelated points are joined together and treated as a single proposition or statement. The person who's replying is expected to accept or reject both together, when in reality, one may be acceptable while the other is not. Does your mother know that you're stupid? Have you stopped beating your wife? Is it right to pay taxes to Caesar or not? These conjoin two things together, and the person replying is expected to accept or reject both at the same time. Then there are appeals, which come in many different forms. Appeals to force. Anybody who doesn't agree with the new company policy will be fired. Or appeals to pity. You mean that you don't think this essay or article is any good? I spent so much time on it. How can you sentence this man to life in prison? Who's going to look after his wife and his children? And God couldn't possibly judge my lovely granny, could he? Appeals to consequences say, if we allow these people to preach the gospel, then our culture will be changed. Therefore, we should stop them. Then there are appeals to popularity, which is when something's argued to be true on the basis that lots of people, even a majority, believe it to be so. This is often an appeal to the fashionable orthodoxy or common sense theology of the day. Everybody knows that the world's flat. This is the 20th century. Nobody believes that rubbish anymore. And how can millions of people be wrong in their sincere beliefs? Then there are hasty generalizations, and this is often used to write off a whole idea or practice by making assumptions about the whole from a very small sample set. All Italians are bald. Well, the one I met once was. All churches are boring. Or the one I went to 10 years ago was. Christians are judgmental. Well, the one who hurt me was. Christianity is irrelevant to life. At least the last time I looked, it was. Now, the last four logical fallacies that I want to talk about are begging the question, straw man, genetic fallacies, and the post hoc fallacy. Begging the question fallacies are a kind of fallacy where a person will make an assumption and go through a process of circular reasoning where their original assumption is inserted into the argument. They put the conclusion into one of the premises. We can see this in the reasoning of the philosopher David Hume on miracles. A miracle is a violation of the laws of nature, and as a firm and unalterable experience has established these laws, the proof against a miracle from the very nature of the fact is as entire as any argument from experience can possibly be imagined. But it is a miracle that a dead man should come to life, because that has never been observed in any age or country. There must therefore be uniform experience against every miraculous event, otherwise the event would not merit that appellation. And as uniform experience amounts to a proof, There is here a direct and full proof from the nature of the fact against the existence of any miracle. Let's put that into an argument. Premise 1, the laws of nature cannot be violated. Premise 2, miracles are violations of the laws of nature. Conclusion, therefore miracles do not occur. But this is just a conclusion that is a restatement of the original assumption. In stating that the raising of a dead man has never been observed in any age or country, Hume is begging the question, has such a thing never been observed in any age or country? Hume's assuming that it has not ever been seen, but what if it has and Hume doesn't know about it? Hume's argument is based on a presupposition about the complete uniformity of nature. However, such an assumption is not even consistent with his own theory of knowledge, according to which all effects follow not with like certainty from their supposed causes. C.S. Lewis notices this and writes in reply to Hume, now, of course, we must agree with Hume that if there is absolute uniform experience against miracles, if in other words they've never happened, why then they never have. And unfortunately, we know the experience against them to be uniform only if we know that all the reports about them are false. And we can only know all the reports of them to be false only if we already know that miracles have never occurred. In fact, we are arguing in a circle. Straw man logical fallacies are where somebody makes the case much weaker than it actually is. It has to be said that sometimes Christians are guilty of using this tactic against others, so we need to watch out for that. For example, when Christians claim that atheists have no moral framework to specify right from wrong, this could be a straw man because there are examples of non-theistic moral theories, for example, utilitarianism. Another example of a straw man might be that Christianity is a list of do's and don'ts and has gone out of date. Is that really the fully fledged claim of Christian faith? Or that Christianity is not concerned with reasons and evidence, it's just about having faith? Is that the strongest position that could be presented of Christian belief? We need to be careful about presenting straw man arguments that are weaker than the actual view that somebody might really take. Then there is the genetic fallacy. This doesn't have anything to do with DNA or genetics. It's the logical fallacy or mistaken reasoning by which an idea is rejected on the basis of its origin. This is where an explanation for belief is confused with the truthfulness or veracity of the actual belief or idea. An example from the New Testament might be, can anything good come out of Nazareth? It's sometimes been leveled against Christians through the psychoanalytic critique of religious belief, which comes from Sigmund Freud and others. This would be that religion fulfills some sort of need or longing that human beings have, and that therefore if we can explain what that longing is, then we've explained what God is and whether or not he exists. For example, the disciples only believed in the resurrected Jesus because they were afraid and wanted a father figure. Now clearly this is fallacious because even if we were to grant that the disciples came to believe in the risen Jesus because they were afraid, wanted a father figure and didn't know what else to do, that doesn't affect the fact of whether or not Jesus actually rose from the dead or not. What really happened or didn't happen seems to be unaffected by an explanation of the disciples, ancient or modern, psychology. Finally, there is the post hoc fallacy, and this is where two events running in parallel are fallaciously joined together causally. For example, the telephone rings and the doorbell immediately sounds. Therefore, the telephone ringing must have caused the doorbell. Or my car's been playing up and it won't start, and in frustration, I kick the tyre. Suddenly the car starts. And maybe I would reason from that the tyre kicking caused the car to start. But that's to associate two different things together causally, and that's mistaken. I think we need to be careful when we claim that miracles have happened or that different supernatural things have occurred at the same time as we've been praying. We've looked at some mistakes in thinking with the aim of being people who want to believe what's true or real. But in a culture of information and competing messages, we all need to learn how to think clearly and honestly, or we risk being moved by what is popular or what the current fashionable orthodoxy is, rather than what's really real or true. People ask things for many different reasons. We're persuaded that something is true based on logic, but also based on feelings, emotions, what we want, who we are, what we think we should think, or what other people tell us to believe. We are complicated beings. What you have learned today is potentially dangerous. There is a danger that we could become big-headed monsters. We need to keep remembering and recognizing that people are not logical machines, and that the reasons why someone might struggle with some beliefs may not be logical at all. It may be that the suggestion of trust or a relationship with God, which according to Christianity God invites us to have, could be a painful or personally difficult issue for somebody. Christianity has nothing to fear from logic at all, simply because real, authentic faith cares about real things like integrity and honesty. It would be pretty odd for a faith to extol these virtues, but require the opposite of them for its initial impulse. Most people think that faith is like a room in the house where logic isn't allowed to come in and sit on the sofa. They don't realize that without logic, there's no room, there's no reality, there's no sofa, there's no perception, there's no distinctions. Logic is like air. It's utterly unavoidable. There are many kinds of reasons, and there are many roads into the human heart, and we all should be willing to follow the argument wherever it leads us. We expect others to listen to the truth, to seek it, to find it, to search for it. But are we willing to do the same ourselves? Where do you and I need to respond to the truths in our own lives and hearts?